during your presentation. That was really, heartwarming. Thank you. Alessandra.
Well, biometric data, which is definitively part of the so-called sensitive data or special categories of data, generally speaking and ideally, should be based on a very strong explicit consent. But again, we are going back to what we were saying before, that there may be situations where consent is not that idle. So once again, we may try to work on the other legal basis we could assist, and I would repeat what I was saying before. So again, the vital interest and the public interest may be some relevant basis to be used. In the awareness that, of course, the level of caution must be very, very high for the risks that we heard before. And it was, I think, also very honest, I think, in the handbook when it was underlined the possibility that once biometric data are used, that they are susceptible to be also used, for example, by public authorities for other purposes as law enforcement. That's quite a relevant issue, I would say, that has to do with fundamental rights and freedoms. And I was speaking about a special caution. Again, here, the data protection impact assessment I refer to is particularly relevant because the risks are very, very high, and that the measures which counterbalance the risks must be very, very high as well as, of course, as security, which is crucial.
Alex, and I want to warn all of us that we have 25 minutes to go.
Maybe just a last point on that. I think it is good that we're exploring different legal grounds for processing. Having said that, and it's not just on the work of the humanitarian, but also development sector, one thing that we're also trying to challenge is the problem analysis that's being done by the different actors as to, do you really need to be collecting biometric information? Some of the justifications given are around, fraud, double dipping into aid funding, corruption. But because there's no baseline, and we have asked different organizations to tell us, what was this amount of fraud that you're trying to solve, address? If that is less than the cost of you deploying a massive biometric system, then you should really rethink whether that is actually solving your problem, when we know actually, to be honest, that a lot of the corruption is happening not even at the beneficiary level, but at the project and program management level. So maybe challenging even the justification for the resorting to such technology.
Okay, so I think it's 3:36, and I think as of right now, I think we are all clear that the data protection law, sensitive data is clearly defined, a defined term that comes with specific legal obligations. Correct. However, definitions by themselves, might not take us as far as we want, and may not do that much. I think, as Mila mentioned, what constitutes sensitive data can vary across context, and very importantly, can vary across how much people understand, what sensitive data is, or what consent means, actually. So, Brian, I think you've been working with Massimo and colleagues at the SARC for quite some time, looking at research on how sensitive humanitarian information can be secure in a digital environment. So my question to you is, what are, as of today, from a technical point of view, and making it accessible to everybody in the room, the main cybersecurity and privacy challenges that you think humanitarian organizations, face today?
Good. So from a technical perspective, I really see three major areas of challenges, three really grand challenges in this space, which I think in the humanitarian sector are just kind of vastly amplified versions of security and privacy challenges that everybody faces throughout the world, but they're much worse in the humanitarian context. So the first is the way humanitarian organizations, the tools, technical tools humanitarian organizations can use to communicate and interact both internally and with their clients. Things like messaging apps, biometrics, these kinds of tools. In general, the commercially available tools tend to be developed primarily with convenience, attractiveness, functionality in mind, with security added as an afterthought. And like I said, this is a problem for everybody, but especially a huge problem in the humanitarian context. For example, and this is especially a problem because in humanitarian contexts, often in many parts of the world, the tools that humanitarian workers have to use to communicate and interact with clients are tightly constrained by what's actually available, what the local population understands, can accept, or is commonly used, like maybe only SMS is really available. And a lot of these technologies are extremely insecure, vulnerable to surveillance in all sorts of respects. Some, for example, messaging apps are better than others in terms of these respects, but even the best available currently are still extremely vulnerable in other ways, like they leak even if they protect the content of communication end-to-end, they still leak metadata like crazy, like who's talking to whom, at what times, when you're even online versus offline, even if you're not talking, things like that, and that can be extremely sensitive and vulnerable to surveillance. The technologies that can potentially provide further protection are not really mature or usable, widely usable enough. So that's kind of the grand challenge when it comes to the tools that humanitarians use to interact with, especially client populations. So the second major grand challenge, I'd say, is the collection and management of data itself, the processes.